Hello everyone, peace be upon you. Before we begin, don't forget to hit the like button and subscribe, and stay with me until the end of the story. Also, leave a comment telling me which city and country you're watching from. I'd love to see how far my story has reached. For those of you who have already subscribed, I sincerely wish you good health, ease in all your affairs, abundant blessings, and may all your hopes and dreams come true. Amen. Now, let's begin the story. The Carolina sun sat low but hot over Fort Liberty, baking the training grounds until the dust turned to fine powder under every boot. Whistles snapped the air, instructors barked names, and a new line of recruits shuffled across the gravel with that mix of nerves and bravado you can smell. Lena Matthews kept her hands steady on her duffel and her eyes forward. No fidgeting, no jokes, no looking for a friendly face. She'd learned long ago that quiet gives you room to see more. The weapons table was set up near the flagpole. Carbines in neat stacks, sidearms sealed in cases, and at the end, long, black, and heavy, an M24. It caught a thin line of sun like a knife. Someone behind Lena laughed under his breath. Bet she can't even pick that thing up. Another voice, a little louder, she'll drop it. Watch. Lena didn't turn. She stepped closer, felt the heat coming off the metal. She lifted the M24, not yanking, just taking the weight into her shoulder, testing the sling, gauging balance. Her forearms trembled once, then settled. She set it down as if she was placing it on glass. Sergeant Bill Harper stopped mid-sentence and watched. Square jaw, gray at the temples, voice that cut. He didn't say a word, just clocked the way Lena moved and the way the laughter tried to live in the space around her. He went back to roll call and rules about safety and respect. The jokes died down, but the glances didn't. By midday they marched past the Harris firing range to orientation. Targets sat out across the field like coins pushed into a green rug. Wind flags fluttered just enough to matter. On the far side, pine trees made a high wall, dark and steady. Lena marked distances in her head without looking like she was counting. She noted the heat shimmer, the crosswind, the slope. She did it the way she always had, quiet, automatic, useful later. Chow was fast and loud. Trays hit tables, somebody bragged about high school football, somebody else about hunting trips that probably never happened. Lena ate, drank water, and left early. Camp Roosevelt barracks smelled like detergent, rubber mats, and old paint. Bunks lined both walls, footlockers centered, fans humming. She stowed her kit, squared her sheets, and sat with a little cleaning mat rolled out, empty hands tracing where a bolt would be, where a spring would slide. A couple guys watched and smirked. Look at her. Pretend practice. Another voice, Instagram soldier. Lena kept her routine. Pretend practice becomes muscle memory when the lights go out. Rodriguez passed by, gave a small nod, nothing more. He had the quiet eyes of somebody who notices before he speaks. On the other side, Miller leaned back on his elbows and grinned like the room belonged to him. Relax, Matthews, he said, voice just loud enough. Range will eat you alive tomorrow. Lena looked at him once, not hostile, not soft. We'll see. Night fell quick. Outside, the range lights threw long stripes across the dirt. Inside, the barracks buzzed with card games and phone screens. Lena took her time. She ran through the setup sequence in her head, bipod out, stock tight, cheek well gentle, breathing in, breathing out. She closed her eyes and saw the reticle sit, then break clean. Her hands made small motions in the air like a pianist without a keyboard. Harper came through on inspection. He stopped at her bunk, stared at the empty mat and the invisible rifle. You know what time wake-up is, Matthews? Yes, Sergeant. Then get some sleep and bring that focus with you. Yes, Sergeant. He moved on. No praise, no scoff. Just a marker laid down, he'd seen her. Lights out didn't mean silence. Laughter leaked from the dark, quick whispers about who'd wash out and who'd survive. Lena lay on her back and let the words slide past. She thought of why she was here, not to win a conversation, not to take a photo, not to impress a room. To do a job that demands control when everyone else shakes. To make a good shot when it counts. Morning came with the kind of sharp air that sits high in your chest. Boots hit the floor, buckles snapped, canteens bumped metal. They ran before breakfast, a low loop along the fence line. Breath burned, sweat cooled fast. Lena kept a steady pace, saving the burst for later. At the armory window, the line inched forward. Miller cracked a joke about asking the M24 to go easy on her. Someone laughed like they had to. Rodriguez kept his eyes on the forms. At the range brief, Harper set the rules. No shortcuts, no chest beating, no unsafe moves. You don't fight the rifle, he said. You work with it. Or it will own you. He didn't look at anyone in particular, but Lena felt the words land where they needed to land. They learned the positions, the callouts, the corrections. Rachel stood 2 lanes over, chewing her lip, checking her sling twice. Lena made sure her bipod bit into the dirt and the stock sat right. When the line went hot for dry fire, she watched the reticle settle like a coin in a jar, then the press. Smooth. Reset. Again. Wind picked up, a tick stronger. She filed it away. By lunch, the jokes were quieter. Not gone, just thinner. The heat rose off the ground in waves. Flags twitched. Across the field, the 1,000-meter plate was so small it could have been a trick of light. Lena didn't stare at it. She let it sit in the corner of her eye like a promise with no date. Back at Camp Roosevelt, she rinsed her face, drank slow, loosened her shoulders. Miller strutted past with that same grin, only tighter at the edges now. Don't blink, Matthews, he said. You'll miss your whole week. She answered with the same 2 words. We'll see. The day ended the way military days end, a whistle, a list, a time. After evening chow, Lena rolled out the mat again. She wasn't chasing perfection. She was building a floor she wouldn't fall through. Cheek weld, breath, press. Cheek weld, breath, press. Around her, the barracks settled. Voices faded. Fans droned. The invisible rifle in her hands felt less invisible. When she finally lay down, she didn't pray for easy shots. She asked for a steady mind. Out on the Harris firing range, the targets waited in the dark, cold and patient. In the morning, the line would go live. And the room that laughed would learn the difference between noise and results. The sun came up clean and bright over Harris firing range, wind flags barely moving, air cool enough to bite. Harper walked the line with a clipboard and a stare that made people fix their feet. Safety on my count. You fire when told. You don't guess. You follow through. He blew the whistle. Ear protection in. Bolts checked. Hands steadied. Lena lay prone, bipod set, stock in tight, cheek weld light. Dry fire was done, this was the first live crack. Harper called it. 300. Fire. Rifles popped across the line. Some shots slapped steel, some spat dirt. Lena found her sight picture, let the reticle settle, breathed in, breathed out, held, pressed. The steel rang. She didn't look around. She reset, watched the flag twitch, pressed again. Another ring. Miller's lane went off fast, 3 quick snaps. 2 rang, 1 through dust. He grinned anyway like speed was the goal. 400. Wind nudged right to left. Lena held that tiny correction, pressed, and heard the plate sing again. Rachel's shot went wide. Harper crouched at her shoulder and corrected her grip. Miller was louder now, cracking jokes between strings. Rodriguez said little, but his grouping tightened each time. At 500, the misses stacked for half the line. Heat shimmered started to rise, thin but real. Lena focused on what was in her control: position, breath, the press that broke like a door on silent hinges. Her round clipped near center. Harper noted it without a word. A few heads turned. Nobody laughed. Break came with water bottles and hands shaking out cramps. Miller swaggered by Lena's mat. "Nice beginner's luck," he said, pretending to stretch. She looked at him once and went back to her notes: wind call, hold, settle time. He moved on, but his voice carried to anyone who needed a reason to smirk. Back on the line, 600 showed who was guessing. Dirt plumes puffed, corrections came late. Lena kept the rhythm. Inhale, exhale, pause, press. Steal. She logged it in her head and moved on. Harper's boots stopped behind her more than once, then kept going. Not praise, not a pat. Just that mark again, he was seeing it. 800 put a crack in the room's confidence. Misses made people jab their triggers. Harper barked once to cut the noise. "You don't yank it. You let it break." Lena nudged her hold a hair, felt the trigger stack, and broke clean. The ring was fainter at that distance, but it was there. Miller missed, swore under his breath, hit on the second try, then shook his head like the plate owed him. By the time the 1,000-meter plate came up, the range had fallen into a quiet you only get when people know it matters. The target looked like a coin at the far end of the world. Harper called 2 lanes at a time. Miss, miss. Hit, miss. Dirt, dirt. Lena went down behind the glass, kept her cheek weld light so she didn't torque the stock, and read the twitching flag. She let the world get small. Breath in. Breath out. The press was steady. The echo took a second, then the faint, undeniable clang reached them. A couple of recruits glanced over as if they hadn't meant to. Rodriguez gave the slightest nod without turning his head. Miller stared straight ahead. Harper blew the whistle and called a halt. He wrote something, tore off a page, handed it to a runner. "Matthews," he said, voice flat, "stay after." He didn't explain. He didn't need to. The rest of the platoon cleared brass and reset targets. Rumors moved faster than trucks. By Chow, the story had grown its own legs. She'd hit at 1,000, she'd done it first try, she'd done it calm. Lena ate, drank, and said nothing. After lunch, a message came down from Command Office Building 07. Commander Robert Harris wanted to observe the afternoon string. The range went tense in that quiet way soldiers recognize. People stood straighter. Talk got careful. Harris arrived with 2 aides and a pair of cold eyes that missed nothing. He watched the next round in silence. When Lena's lane lit up, he stepped closer, just behind Harper. 1,000, Harper said. Lena repeated the process. The plate chimed. Harris didn't clap. He didn't smile. He simply said, again. He turned to Harper. Set 1320. The range crew exchanged a look, 3/4 of a mile. Targets shifted, wind picked up just enough to get annoying. Harris folded his arms. Whenever you're ready, Matthews. She checked her dope, added the drop, watched the flag, waited for the small lull. Breath in. Breath out. The press broke smooth. Long seconds stretched thin, then the distant steel answered. Someone on the crew whispered a curse they hadn't meant to say out loud. Harris's mouth moved a fraction, not quite a smile. Again, he said. She sent another. The steel sang back. Harris stepped forward. That will do. He spoke to Harper without looking away. Keep her on long-range rotation. I'll review the log. Then to Lena, simple and final, good shooting. Don't let it make you lazy. Yes, sir, she said. He left like a door closing. Back at Camp Roosevelt, the air felt different. People made room for her in the aisle without thinking about it. Rachel stopped by and said, "That was solid," then flushed like she'd said too much. Rodriguez sat down at the end of her bunk, set his cleaning kit, and worked in quiet that felt like trust. Miller didn't talk. He cleaned in sharp, angry motions that squeaked metal. When lights dimmed, Harper came through one more time. He paused at Lena's bunk. "Qualifications in 48 hours, he said. "What you did today doesn't count if you don't do it then." Lena nodded. "Understood." Harper's eyes softened a shade. "Get sleep. Bring the same mind." She lay down and let the day replay once, then put it away. She didn't hold on to the clang at 1320 like a trophy. She filed it under, "What I can do when I do the work." Outside, the range lights went dark one by one. Inside, the fans hummed like a low tide. The barracks didn't laugh tonight. It listened to the quiet. Morning would bring the clipboard, the distances, and the nerves that chew through people who think they can fake it. Lena closed her eyes and breathed with the same pace she used behind the glass. Control in, control out. The test was coming, and now the eyes watching weren't just recruits looking for a joke. They were instructors measuring futures. And somewhere down the hall, Miller stared at the ceiling, jaw tight, already writing a story where tomorrow belonged to him, at least in the story Miller was writing for himself. Morning put that story under a bright light. Reveille snapped the barracks awake, boots hit the floor, and the platoon moved out under a pale sky that promised heat later. Harper met them at Harris firing range with a new tone. "Pair up. Sniper and spotter. You pass as a team or you don't pass." Heads turned fast. Choices mattered. Miller scanned the line like a man picking a partner for a dance he intended to lead. Lena didn't wait for the noise. She looked to Rodriguez. He nodded once. "Done." The brief was short, distance calls, wind reads, time on target, no wasted words. Rodriguez slid beside her with the glass and a notebook, voice low and even. 600. Quarter value, right to left. Hold point 2. Lena adjusted, set her cheek weld, and pressed. Steel. He logged, shifted. 800. Same wind, add a hair. She broke another clean shot. Their rhythm formed fast, his call, her press, both of them correcting in small steps instead of big swings. 2 lanes over, Miller paired with a talkative kid named Harris, eager eyes, shaky hands. The first few calls were off by a full minute, then overcorrected. Miller cut him off, took his own reads, and rushed his trigger like he could force steel to ring by volume. Dust jumped. His jaw tightened. Targets changed angles, wind flickered, heat shimmer grew. Rodriguez kept it simple. Wait half breath. Now. Lena fired inside the pocket and let the plate confirm what they already knew. Harper passed behind them, glanced at their log, and moved on. No compliment, but he didn't need to say it. The pattern was there. Across the line, voices rose. Miller's lane snapped with irritation. "Call it right, man." Harris whispered an apology that fell apart in his throat. Their next 3 shots scattered. Break came under the shade with canteens and quick calories. Rachel drifted over long enough to ask how Lena handled the hold so steady. "Small corrections," Lena said. "Don't chase it. Let it come to you." Rachel nodded like she wanted to write it on her hand. Miller walked past with that lift in his chin that said he would die before asking advice. He didn't look at Lena, but the air around him felt brittle. The afternoon block moved to stress shoot. Packs on, low crawl, wall climb, trench, then immediately to the gun. Harper made the point with a finger jabbed at the dirt. Your body will lie to you. Your breath will try to run. Make it walk. On the whistle, they went. Mud glued to sleeves, rope burned palms, lungs roared. Lena saved her sprint for the last 10 yards, slid into prone, and let silence form in the middle of the noise. Rodriguez was already there, numbers prepared. 300, easy. Clear it and move. She snapped 2 center hits. 500. Wind just kissed. Hold a tick right. She pressed. Steal. Miller hit the range first, chest heaving, hands shaky. He sent 3 rounds in a rush, cussed, yanked the bolt like it had insulted him, then finally landed one. His spotter tried to steady him with a measure he'd lost an hour ago. They reset and did it again. And again. By the 3rd lap, half the line was living on fumes. Lena's legs wanted to shake, she made them still. She cut her inhale short, cut her exhale clean, held the press steady like it weighed nothing. Rodriguez trimmed holds with a pencil-width margin. Their hits stayed hits. Harper crouched once at their side and watched without talking. When he stood, he gave a small nod to himself that nobody was supposed to see. Evening brought a field problem at Black Creek Woods. Pair teams moved through trees, spotting hidden plates and decoys meant to trick greedy shooters. Rodriguez caught a glint off a branch and whispered, "Decoy. Don't waste it." Lena waited, shifted, picked the real target half hidden behind brush. 1 shot. The clean ring carried deeper than it should have in that shaded place. Miller's team bit on 2 decoys in a row, then argued in whispers that weren't quiet enough to count as stealth. When an instructor ghosted past them and marked, "compromised concealment," Miller's shoulders went high and tight. They regrouped at dusk near the trailhead. Harper read the numbers. Top marks, Matthews and Rodriguez. Efficient calls. No drama. He didn't smile. He didn't need to. Harris stepped out from the trees a beat later, as if he'd been there all along. "I watched you take the decoy bait, Miller," he said, voice flat. "The enemy loves a shooter who thinks faster is smarter." No lecture followed. Just that. It landed harder than a speech. Camp Roosevelt felt different that night. Respect wasn't loud, it was in the way people gave Lena space to pass, or the way questions reached her instead of going to the mouthiest guy on the row. Rachel asked about scope shadow. 2 others asked about trigger prep. Lena answered without acting like a teacher. Do the same thing the same way. Rodriguez sat with his boot unlaced and a water bottle pressed to a bruised knee, listening like a co-author. Miller made a show of not looking. He cleaned the M24 until the metal squeaked, then slammed the bolt home too hard and pretended it was nothing. When the room got quiet, he finally spoke toward no one. "Some people just get lucky a couple days. No one fed it. Silence isn't a friend to a man picking a fight with the air." Lights dimmed. Fans hummed. Lena stretched her hands and felt the small tremor of fatigue run out to her fingertips and back. She lay down and tracked the day once, like checking a map before folding it. The rhythm with Rodriguez. The decoy she didn't shoot. The way Harper's nod didn't need a word. She told herself the same line she'd used since day one, results, not noise. Somewhere near the far end of the barracks, Miller turned in his bunk until the mattress springs complained, chasing a version of tomorrow where he didn't miss. Morning would bring a new kind of test, Harper had hinted, a head-to-head that stripped out excuses. Lena didn't rehearse it in her head. She put it in the box with every other thing that waits its turn. Breath in. Breath out. She let the room fade until there was only the simple plan she could keep, show up calm, do the work the same way, and let the clang speak louder than any voice in the room. That was the plan sitting in Lena's chest the next morning when Harper formed the platoon on the gravel and Harris walked out with a clipboard that meant no one would be faking anything today. Head to head, Harris said. 3 phases. Same rifles. Same ammo. No excuses. He looked at Miller, then at Lena, like he was measuring time. You two. On the line. Phase 1 was distance work, 300 through 1000. Wind flags flicked right to left, light but real. Harper laid the ground rules again in a flat voice. You will wait for my call. You will show control. Miller went first. At 300, he was fine. 2 center hits and a quick look around to make sure people saw. At 400, he landed one, then yanked the second high. At 600, he missed, hit, missed. He cursed under his breath and shook his head like the steel had cheated him. By 800 he was riding frustration, sending a round too fast, correcting too much, chasing his miss. At 1000 he hit once and then threw dirt twice. Lena lay in, set the bipod, breathed until her heart stopped knocking, and ran the same process 6 times. She didn't hurry. She didn't drag. She added a hair of hold for the wind and let the trigger break clean. Every plate rang. No comments. No fist pump. She rolled her shoulder once to keep it loose and stood when Harper told her to. Harris marked his sheet and didn't smile. Phase 2 was the stress course. Packs on, low crawl under wire, wall, trench, sprint to the gun and shoot while your lungs tried to throw your hands off target. Miller blasted through the obstacles like he could bully them. He hit the mat heaving and tried to shoot on the inhale. 2 misses, 1 edge hit, 1 clean. He jammed the bolt home hard enough to make the action bark. Second string went worse. He clipped one and sprayed dirt on another plate 20 yards short. Lena did what she trained to do. She saved her sprint for the last 30 feet, slid to prone, let the sight picture settle, and cut a clean press on the small still space between breaths. Rodriguez wasn't her spotter today, but his voice lived in her head anyway, small corrections. She cleared her string, reset, cleared the next. Harper watched her hands more than her face. Harris watched everything. They reset for phase 3 out at the edge of Black Creek Woods. Concealment, Harris said. 30 minutes. 1 moving target. 1 shot. He looked at Miller. If you fire early, you own it. They broke into the trees with gillies and mud. Miller took high ground with a big view and a bad silhouette. He shifted too much, snapped a twig, and left a line of flattened brush that an instructor could have followed blindfolded. He fired the instant a decoy plate walked into a bad angle. Mississippi. The crack popped birds out of trees. Lena took longer. She went low, let the brush break her outline, pulled leaves and dirt over her elbows, and waited for the lull in wind and a clean lane. She watched the real target drift past a stump and stop half a beat. 1 shot. The steel answered with a tight, clear ring that cut through the space between trees. Harris stood up like he'd been waiting to confirm something he already knew. Collins, he said. That's the standard. They regrouped at the range head. Miller was pale and hot at the same time, jaw clenched, eyes fixed on the ground in front of his boots. Harris didn't gloat, didn't raise his voice. Here's what separated you, he said. She waited. You chased. She controlled her breath. You tried to outrun yours. Being loud doesn't move a bullet. He closed the clipboard. We're done here. The platoon broke into a low rustle of talk that died whenever Miller got close. He shoved his rifle into the case like it had betrayed him and walked off without asking permission. Harper watched him go and didn't call him back. Let him cool, he said to no one. Afternoon orders sent the unit right back into the trees for a long patrol and target lanes tucked into the brush. It was the kind of drill that squeezes whatever is left in a day out of your legs. Packs rode heavy. Air under the canopy felt wet. Instructors moved quiet and unseen. Rodriguez fell in beside Lena again without a word. Rachel fell in behind them, checking her footing and her sling. Miller drifted mid-column, shoulders tight, eyes forward like he wasn't going to give anyone a reason to talk to him. The slope steepened near a cut bank where roots stuck out like ribs. Harper held up a hand for a slow roll down the ridge. They started single file, careful on loose dirt. Somewhere downslope a woodpecker hammered, and somewhere upslope a chainsaw from a maintenance crew buzzed and then cut. Lena tasted dust and pine. She lifted her foot for the next step and felt the ground give half an inch. Rodriguez said, "Watch the left, low." She shifted right. Someone far back slipped, grabbed a sapling, and swore. Harper turned his head to mark it. The crack didn't sound like a rifle. It sounded like old wood failing after a long time holding. A dead tree, hidden behind a tangle of vine, let go and swung downslope like a gate. Voices snapped from calm to alert in half a second. "Tree," someone yelled. The trunk hit the bank, bounced, and threw branches and broken limbs like spears. 2 recruits went down hard. One disappeared under a limb as big around as a thigh. The other slid and struck a rock with his head and didn't move. Everything that came after happened at once. Dirt exploded. Packs rolled. The line kinked and then tried to unkink. Harper's voice cut through the panic, sharp and short. "Freeze. Count heads." An instructor sprinted from shadow to the nearest casualty and dropped to a knee. Rodriguez's face went from steady to focused like a lens turning. "Pressure," he said to no one in particular, already moving toward the guy with the bleeding leg. Rachel's mouth opened and closed once before she ran for the med bag. Lena's world narrowed to the trapped recruit. The limb across his thigh looked immovable with hands. Another crack popped from higher up. The dead trunk shifted again. They had seconds before it settled in a worse angle. She scanned upslope, marked a live tree with a clean trunk, and the path a rope could take if they built a lever. "Rope," she said, already shedding her pack. No one had told her to lead. No one needed to. She pointed to 2 steady bodies and an anchor point, fast and clear. "There. Wrap twice. Lock it. On my count." Harper looked straight at her and gave the smallest nod a man can give and still call it a nod. People moved. Hands found the right lines. Mud sucked at boots. The air felt thin and loud at the same time. The injured recruit under the limb tried to speak and only got a torn noise out of his throat. The other lay still, blood bright near his hairline. "Ready," Rodriguez said, hands already deep on the leg wound, pressure exact. "Ready," Rachel said, knuckles white around the med kit. "Ready," came from 2 more voices holding rope. Lena planted her feet, grabbed the line, and set her jaw. "On 3, she said, steady. 1, 2, 3. They hauled. The rope went tight, fibers singing, boots digging through wet dirt. The limb shifted an inch, then 2. Rodriguez kept pressure on the bleeding leg, voice flat and calm. "Hold it. Keep it there. Don't drop." Lena planted her weight and leaned back, feeling the give in the trunk and the small window where a body could slide free. "Now," she said. 2 recruits dragged the pinned man clear while Rachel packed gauze and wrapped the thigh with a clean, brutal wrap. The dead tree settled with a dull thud a heartbeat later, exactly where his bones had been. "Airway good?" Harper called, already kneeling at the second casualty. Rachel moved fast, chin tilt, quick check, eyes steady. Breathing. Pupils reactive. Head laceration, heavy bleed. Lena slipped beside Harper, handed what he needed before he asked. "Tape. More gauze." The world narrowed to hands doing what they were supposed to do. They built a field carry with 2 poles and a poncho. The team lifted in unison on Harper's count and started the slow walk uphill toward the cut where an ATV could reach. Mud tried to steal boots and tempers, but no one snapped. The whole platoon breathed in a single rhythm, lift, step, set. Rodriguez kept a palm on the thigh wrap and a number in his head. Bleeding controlled. Check every 30 seconds. Lena kept an eye on footing and the rope they'd left behind. Leave it, Harper said. We'll recover it later. At the trailhead, an instructor waved down the range cruise gator. The injured went up and out, engines whining, dust hanging low. Silence followed with a buzz of leftover fear. Harris appeared from the trees without ceremony, hat brim low, expression unreadable. His gaze moved from the torn ground to the saved bodies to the rope still biting a live trunk. He didn't ask what happened. He saw it. Harper gave the quick version anyway, spare words and facts only. Harris listened, then looked at Lena. You chose the anchor. You ran the lift. You didn't freeze. Lena shrugged once, shoulders heavy with the come down. Team did it, sir. Harris didn't blink. Teams need a voice. Today, it was yours. He turned to the platoon. You don't plan for dead trees. You plan for control. I saw it here. They moved back toward Fort Liberty with that strange quiet that sometimes follows chaos, the kind that doesn't need music or jokes. At Harris firing range, gear came off, rifles got checked, hands got washed twice. The instructors did what they always do after a scare, they put people back into the work so the mind doesn't feed on what-ifs. Harper called for a short string at 300. Not to measure skill. To steady hands. Lena lay in and sent 2 clean hits without thinking about distance. The clang sounded dull under the aftertaste of adrenaline. She cleared her lane, safed the rifle, and sat back on her heels. Across the line, Miller stood with his rifle idle. He hadn't moved during the recovery until orders put a task in his hands. Now, he looked like a man who'd argued with himself and lost. He chambered around, missed left, stared through the glass like it owed him an apology, then holstered his pride and fixed his wind hold. Next shot rang. He didn't smile. Chow that night tasted like nothing and everything. Words stayed practical. Good pull. Solid wrap. Refill the med bag. Rodriguez dropped into the seat across from Lena, set down his tray, and finally let out the long breath he'd been holding since the crack. You saw the anchor point fast, he said. Lena shook her head. You kept the leg. He shrugged, but the corner of his mouth moved. Respect doesn't need speeches. Back at Camp Roosevelt, the barracks smelled like sweat, bleach, and rain dragged in on pant legs. People drifted by Lena's bunk one by one. Not for autographs. For simple, human things. Thanks. Good call. You saved him. She nodded the same way every time. We saved him. Rachel stood there a second longer than most, eyes glassy in the dim light. I was going to freeze, she admitted. You didn't let me. Lena answered with something that wasn't a lesson and wasn't a hug. Next time, you'll talk first. Harper did the late pass. He stopped at the end of the row, far enough that the whole room could hear without feeling called out. What you do on clean ranges in good weather is training. What you did today is the reason training matters. His eyes moved, landing on Lena for a half second like a pin in a map. Remember that. Harris called her to Command Office Building 07 before lights out. The room was the same as always, maps, a flag, a desk that could have been anywhere in the army. He didn't sit. 2 things, he said. 1, I'll file the incident report. Your name will be in the right lines. 2, don't let praise soften your habits. Skill is nothing if you let it unspool. Yes, sir. He studied her for a beat. You're scheduled for qualification at 06 tomorrow. Sleep like someone who intends to pass on purpose. Yes, sir. He dismissed her with a nod that felt like both a warning and a guardrail. In the hallway, Lena paused at the window. Harris firing range lay dark under a thin moon. She thought about the clang at 1320, the rope bite in her hands, the way people moved when they trusted a voice to be calm. None of it made her bigger in her own head. It made the job feel clearer. She was here to do two things: master the rifle, and not lose herself when it mattered. Back in the barracks, Miller was at his bunk with a towel over his shoulders, hair damp from a shower that probably didn't cool much. He spoke without looking up. "You did what needed doing." It wasn't an apology. It wasn't a truce. It was the smallest step a proud man can take without breaking. Lena answered the only way that wouldn't turn it into a fight. "We all did." Lights out. Fans humming. Rain started somewhere out beyond the motor pool, slow and steady. Lena set her alarm and lay flat, watching nothing in the dark. She didn't rehearse the next day's shots, didn't replay the tree. She let the pictures come and go, then put them away one by one. Breath in. Breath out. She found the quiet spot she could stand on. At 05:30, the platoon would form up for qualification. The clipboard would come out. Distances would stack. And for the first time since day one, the room wasn't waiting to see if she would fail. It was waiting to see if she would keep doing the same plain, boring, relentless thing: control the press, call the wind, and let results do the talking. Somewhere in the dark, a siren wailed far off and faded. Lena closed her eyes and set her mind where it belonged, on the next clean shot and the work it takes to make it look simple. On the next clean shot, that was the only thing in her head when 0530 came and the barracks shook to life. Formation was quiet. No jokes, no bravado, just boots on gravel and breath making clouds in the cool air. Harper took the platoon to Harris firing range with that clipped pace that says the day's already decided for anyone who didn't prepare. Qual day. No speeches. The targets were out like coins again, 300 to 1,000, wind flag doing a small, nervous dance left to right. Lena checked her rifle like she always did. Nothing new. No magic. Stock snug. Bipod locked. Bolt smooth. She ran one dry press and felt the trigger stack. It was the same as yesterday and the same as the first time she touched an M24 for real. Harper moved down the line, stopping where he needed to stop, saying exactly what had to be said and nothing else. "You know the course. You know the rules. Pass or fail is you." At 300, lanes went hot in pairs. The first wave hit. Some rings, some dirt. Lena slid into prone when her turn came and did the routine. Breath in, breath out, hold, press. Steal. She didn't chase the sound, she just reset. At 400, she added the smallest hold for the breeze and pressed again. Steal. Rachel 2 lanes over found her center on the second shot and gave a quick, tight smile to herself, then got back to work. Rodriguez, steady as always, kept his grouping like he was laying tiles on a floor. 500 made people second guess. The sun was rising into that harsh angle where glare sneaks under your brim. Lena lifted her cap a notch, changed nothing else, and let the reticle sit where it belonged. Hit. At 600, heat shimmer started to wobble the picture. She trusted the call she'd use on a bad day: small correction, no drama. Hit. She heard Miller miss, then correct, then hit, then mutter something too low to carry. He didn't look left or right. His lane was an island he refused to leave. 800. Harper's voice carried just enough. "Don't yank. Let it break." Lena loosened her jaw, exhaled to that even point where the body stops arguing, and took the shot that was there. Hit. The sound came thin and late, but it came. She logged it in the back of her mind and moved on without saving it as a trophy. 1,000 is where people's hands tell the truth. Lanes went cold, then hot, then quiet again. Harper called her number. Lena settled, checked wind, checked level, and waited half a breath longer than felt comfortable. The press was light. The wait after felt long enough to write a letter. Then the plate chimed, faint but clean. She didn't celebrate. She safed, cleared, rolled to a knee, and let her heart catch up. Scores got marked fast. Harper didn't read them out loud. Qual was a gate, not a parade. They cycled through positions, corrections, and a short stress string to finish. When the whistle blew final, Harris walked out from the shade by the tower with his hands behind his back. He looked like a man confirming a list against what his eyes had seen. Matthews, he said. Top of board. He didn't add adjectives. He didn't need to. He turned and spoke to the platoon without raising his voice. If you passed today, you earned it. If you didn't, you know exactly why. We keep moving. Back at Camp Roosevelt, relief came out in small ways. Shoulders dropped. Jokes returned in short lines instead of long speeches. Rachel bumped Lena's shoulder with her own and said, I kept hearing you in my head, small corrections. Rodriguez sat on the footlocker, unlaced a boot, and gave a single nod that said more than a handshake. Clean run, he murmured. You too, she said, because he had been as reliable as gravity since day one. Miller approached like a man choosing every step. He stopped at a respectful distance, eyes on the floor for half a beat, then on Lena. I passed, he said. No smile. No chin lift. Just a fact. Good, Lena answered. Silence sat between them and didn't bite. He shifted, like there was something else he meant to fight with and had decided not to. You did what you said you'd do, he added, the smallest admission he could give and still be himself. She gave him the same 2 words she'd used all along. We'll see. But this time the edge was gone. Graduation week moved in a straight line after that. Gear inspections. Briefings. A last workout where no one tried to set records. People traded patches, swapped numbers, made promises about meeting up downrange that everybody knew the Army might shuffle. Harper ran one more range block, not to score, just to keep hands honest. He stopped behind Lena and spoke quietly enough that it stayed in the 3 feet between them. You kept your head when it mattered. File that as the only compliment you get from me. He almost smiled, then didn't. She almost laughed, then didn't. The ceremony was simple. The kind the Army has done 1,000 times. Flag, names, a few parents in the back, a line of instructors who could spot a crooked ribbon from 100 yards. Harris moved down the row, pinning, shaking, nodding. When he reached Lena, he paused a heartbeat longer. You came in under noise, he said low. You leave under your own sound. He pinned, shook, and moved on. Rodriguez saluted, then leaned in, whispering, don't forget us when you're famous. She muttered back, not my lane. After, people clapped backs, took photos they'd pretend not to care about later, and drifted toward Chow like gravity pulled them. Lena stepped aside for a minute of air. The range lay off to the right, green and brown and ordinary. A wind flag flipped lazily. Someone laughed near the barracks. Someone yelled for a ride to supply. The post kept being the post. She let herself feel the chain of small decisions that got her here: pick up the rifle, learn the parts, dry fire when the room laughs, listen to a man who only talks when there's a reason, tell your breath when to behave, wait for the clean shot, act when a tree tries to kill somebody, and don't pretend it made you special. Miller walked past with Rachel, talking about assignments in the most practical tone he'd used all cycle. He didn't look at Lena. He didn't avoid her. He just existed on the same ground without the need to prove it was his. That was enough of an ending for them. Rodriguez found her a minute later, hands in his pockets. You still owe me coffee, he said. For the knee, she said. And the calls. He shrugged. We'll call it even. Harper gathered the platoon once more at the end of the day, the light turning gold and long across the gravel. You'll remember different parts of this place, he said. Some of you will remember the first time the rifle kicked you wrong. Some will remember that dead tree. Some will remember a number on a board. I want you to remember one thing: control beats noise. He pointed toward the range without looking. There's always wind. There's always heat. There's always someone talking. You do your job anyway. Night came easy. The barracks sounded like a bus station, bags zipping, boots thumping, jokes working a little too hard to cover the fact that people were about to scatter. Lena sat on her bunk and rolled up the same cleaning mat she'd unrolled on day one. It wasn't a ritual now. It was a habit she trusted. She tucked it away, stood, and took one last look at the empty lane where her hands had been practicing in the air that first night. Outside, the Harris firing range sat quiet under a sky that didn't care how many shots had been perfect today. That felt right. Tomorrow would belong to some other unit, some other first shot, some other recruit trying to decide whether to listen to the room or to results. Lena walked toward the door and let the lesson settle where it belonged. Discipline doesn't make noise. Patience doesn't either. They don't have to. When it counts, the steel answers for you. She stepped out into the night air, light breeze lifting the edge of her sleeve, and headed for formation one last time. The work would go on somewhere new, under a different flag or in a different field. The job wouldn't change. Find the position. Read the wind. Control the press. And if the room laughs, let it. The only sound you need is the one you make on purpose.